Last night, the Ukrainian Defense Forces launched active strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation. Today is Thursday, June 19th, and we present our traditional military summary with military expert Roman Svitan. I urge you, as always, to be active. Give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel of the 24th, as well as to my personal channel, the link to which is indicated in the description. Be sure to share our conversation. Roman just showed footage of what is believed to be the 29th aircraft again, using Western bombs on the town of Kozinka in the Belgorod region.
Підписатися на YouTube 24-го, підписатися на мій YouTube канал, який прописаний в описі. Звичайно ж, ставте лайки і діліться нашою розмовою. Пан Романе, щойно продемонстрував кадри, як Міг-29 знову західними авіабомбами відпрацював по місті Козинка Белгородської області.
High-precision aerial bombs. This is evident from the results. With an accuracy of plus or minus 1.5 to 2 meters, they effectively carry out combat missions, destroying command posts and places of concentration of Russian troops, especially in areas of dense deployment. This is the full-fledged combat work of aviation, the need for which we have been talking about for 4 years now. It is this component that we have lacked for all 3 years, and now it is finally beginning to gain momentum. Although this is far from the limit, we can say that it is just warming up. So far, we have seen isolated cases of pinpoint strikes, but in the long term, they should become massive. Such strikes on the enemy's rear area to a depth of about 50-70 kilometers should be used by aviation before any ground operations. Until the Russian rear is actually ground down in this mode, it is not possible to start any ground operations, and could not have been earlier. It is more expedient to remain in a defensive position until our aviation is fully operational, and then after full-fledged aviation training to proceed to the liberation of our territory. Roman, in addition, the Ukrainian Defense Forces also operated in the Volgograd direction. It is indicated that the video recorded an attack near an airfield in that Russian region. However, I would not say that this was a full-fledged training, because so far there is information that all of our drones are being shot down, especially in fanning raids. Fan flights have resumed, but their effectiveness is questionable. The enemy's frontal air defense is now very dense. Dozens of drones aren't enough. To break through, over 100 need to be launched simultaneously from one point and in one direction. Only then can some reach the deep territory with weaker coverage. But even there, key targets like the airport near Volgograd are protected by separate air defense systems.
Фронтальную, то есть вдоль линии фронта, вдоль линии границы. Потом, естественно, там конь не валялся у россиян. Они все закрыть не могут. Можно пролететь еще несколько часов по практически без ПВОшной местности, но потом, когда вы ходите на объект, ну, допустим, аэродром под Волгоградом, там еще своя объектовая ПВО стоит.
There may be mobile groups and anti-aircraft missile systems, such as Pantsir, that need to be overcome as well. How to penetrate air defense with drones? Only by quantity. There are no other options. If there is one Pantsir with 12 loaded missiles, then for at least one drone to reach the target, you need at least 13 launches. 12 it will shoot down, and the 13th will fulfill the task. And if we are talking about a full-fledged defeat of the object, it is necessary to approach it at least 10 to 15 drones, which means the total to launch at least 25 to 30, if the object is really one Pantsir, as intelligence knows. Only then will some of them be able to break through and hit the target. This means that they must overcome the frontal line, and to pass it, they must lose 50-70 decoy drones. That is, about 100 drones must be directed at one point. Only then it will work. After all, it is worth learning from the Russians, if they do not have enough intelligence to formulate tasks correctly. I am now addressing our great target designators. Learn from the enemy. They act competently in this regard. They should concentrate all drones at one point. First break through the frontal air defenses, then tackle the targeted ones. Instead, they scattered 100 in different directions. Most were shot down, and now we're left talking about a failed attack near Volgograd.
была попытка атаки Волгоградского кого-то чего-то.
What actually happened? They simply disposed of 100 drones to nowhere. That is how it is perceived. Who is the utilizer in the general staff or perhaps on Bankova? Where is this target designation as a process? After all, they agree on the targets. Here you can, here you can't, here carefully, and here, so that more of ours are shot down. This is roughly the logic that can be traced. Crimea is the same story. What? Did they send 3 drones there again? They are shot down on approach. 100 drones should be sent to Crimea every day. Only then will there be a real effect. It would have made more sense to send all 100 drones toward Crimea. Better to lose 70 and hit at least one airfield with 30, than scatter them and achieve nothing, like this failed attempt near Volgograd. We launched them, yes, but what did we hit? Nothing. This is how our long-range weapons are used. And it raises the question, who even needs a war like this? Roman, there were also strikes in the Kursk direction. We are talking about the village of Krylskoye, which we already know, where a warehouse with Russian ammunition burst into flames as a result of the attack. In addition, the 229th Battalion of the 225th Regiment operating in the Sumy direction reported that active hostilities were continuing in the Andreevka area, and they managed to liquidate the battalion commander of an elite Russian unit by showing the relevant document.
Вот тут вопросов нет. Кучненько, конкретно по целям. Скорее всего, работают на наши хаймерсы.
There are really no questions here. It works clearly and precisely on the targets. Apparently, our HIMARS have been used. A sufficient number of M30 and M31 missiles have been received, and now we are gradually striking in such areas as Rilsk, Elgov, and other areas closer to our border, where Russian troops' positions, warehouses, and headquarters have been identified. Aviation, artillery, and drones are targeting the enemy's rear to disrupt logistics. No warehouses, no ammo, no offensive. The strike on the Grilskoye depot showed this clearly. Destroy supplies, and there's nothing to fire. It's a sound strategy, well executed. Roman, we have also reported to our main intelligence directorate that in Berdyansk we managed to liquidate an executioner and collaborator who since 2022 had been involved in the creation of camps that were actually turned into torture camps for Ukrainians. However, we can't show footage of the liquidation itself. YouTube won't let them through, but the representatives of the GUR showed such materials. I'll show them now. This is, in fact, the weapon used to eliminate this collaborator. Here. Since 2014, there has been Operation Liquidation, in which the main role is played by partisans, active, concerned citizens, as well as our intelligence structures. The main intelligence directorate, the Foreign Intelligence Service, the intelligence of the border troops and their special units, and the security service of Ukraine, which has activated its counterintelligence officers in the occupied territories. In addition, there are several groups working on confidants already on Russian territory. The operation is ongoing and is aimed at eliminating all persons involved in terrorist activities on Ukrainian territory. All those involved in the terrorist genocidal attacks and invasion of Ukraine, including collaborators, are to be held accountable. Why? Because each of them is a participant in the process. Collaboration is already a ground in itself, because if a person becomes part of the occupation power, he automatically falls under the category to which the liquidation operation is applied. Such actions need no further proof. If you are a terrorist, you must be eliminated. For example, someone who was reportedly a deputy mayor and collaborated with the occupiers would also clearly fall under this article. The elimination operation will continue and even intensify after our victory and the restoration of control over the state border. None involved in the terrorist attacks against Ukraine will escape justice. They won't die natural deaths. Since 2014, our security services have hunted them relentlessly and professionally. While public reports are rare, most operations stay classified. with special forces now focused on combat tasks at the front.
То есть волки конкретные порвут, потому что сейчас на данный момент мы там раз в неделю говорим, там может 2 раза в неделю о ликвидации российских оккупантов. А реально, потому что большая часть сейчас, конечно, спецслужб занята выполнением боевых задач, в том числе и на линии фронта.
And after our victory, after the restoration of territorial integrity and entry to the state border, several tens of thousands of liquidation specialists will be released, who will deal with the remaining, 500,000 Russians will remain, and for 15 years they will scour the territory of Russia, performing combat tasks. We will pay for this work. Certain financial costs, of course, will be. But it's okay, I think. Each Ukrainian will discount $5 a year to completely clean up all those who came to Russia through the operation liquidation. Roman, the Institute for the Study of War, has once again confirmed the obvious. They have not opened America to us, because we have already discussed this with you. They named the Donbass, in particular the direction to Konstantinovka, where there is the greatest concentration of forces and active use of armored vehicles, as a priority for Russian offensive actions. At the same time, our fighters in the Toretsk area have demonstrated excellent work. The published footage shows how an entire column was destroyed yesterday. It is stated that at least 18 armored vehicles and a significant number of enemy personnel were hit. Here we can talk about mirror action and mirror location. Just as the Russian troops cut into our defenses near Pokrovsk, where we took them into a three-way encirclement, so the situation around Konstantinovka looks similar. It is a kind of bulge, an introduction into the Russian positions. The same picture is observed with Chasov Yar and Toretsk. They are actually half encircled, like a wedge. Of course, for the Russians, a convenient direction remains the offensive on Konstantinovka. Nearby is Horlivka, which today is a powerful military hub, and the city itself was once the most important technical and technological center of Donbass. Now the industrial enterprises in Horlivka, literally saturated with military equipment and infrastructure, are being used by the Russians for technical support of their operations in the area of Toretsk, with a possible advance towards Konstantinovka, as well as in the directions Bakhmut-Chasov Yar, and from the southwest towards Konstantinovka itself. This closest so-called military hub actually allows the Russians to maximize the use of all available resources on this section of the front, especially since both Gorlovka and Toretsk are located at dominant heights above the terrain, including Konstantinovka itself. The Russians are certainly using their geographical advantages and are trying to push our forces out from under Konstantinovka, but at the moment our positions in the area of Chasovy Yar and Toretsk are strengthened and held quite securely. The only weakening is along the route from Pokrovsk to Konstantinovka. We have been talking about this for about a month now. It is urgent to cut off this southwestern Russian claw from Konstantinovka and transfer sufficient forces there. If we cut off this section and throw the Russians off the highway, i.e. to the southeast of it, then nothing will threaten Kostiantynivka anymore. And if Kostiantynivka is safe, you can rest assured that the Slavyansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration will also hold on without any problems. So this year, as before, the summer campaign of the Russians will go into the sand. The operation near Pokrovskoye, which they are now trying to carry out, is definitely failing. They realize this, so they are pulling up their southwestern flank, which they have sagging there. The grouping under the command Bogatyr is engaged in this. And General Nar is active in the Konstantinovsky direction. He is now actively working, and of course the Russians are getting the full brunt of it. They are being hit from all sides, not allowing them to turn around. Until they open their left southwestern flank, there will be no advance at Pokrovskoye. They are actually in a semi-envelope and understand this perfectly well. The front line remains stable. Despite building up forces, enemy attempts to break through, even at the operational tactical level, have failed across the board, with some losses occurring even before May 9th. If we focus our security forces as planned over the past 2 years, Russia won't succeed. A second F-16 brigade is on the way, and once deployed, especially around Melitopol and Berdyansk, they'll make a serious impact. Russia is now hosting the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and late at night, on the night of June 19th, dictator Putin decided to meet with the foreign press, where he made a lot of loud statements. Let's start with military topics, and then we'll move on to his political antics. First of all, he said that all European leaders who talk about the possibility of a Russian offensive against NATO countries in the coming years are allegedly spreading absurdity and untruths. At the same time, the Finns publish footage from the border, which shows the active construction of various fortifications. Here they actually showed what it looks like. At the same time, they do have a powerful military alliance there, so those who analyze Putin's words should listen to him especially carefully, because as a rule, everything should be interpreted exactly the opposite. If he claims that Russia is not going to attack NATO countries, you can be sure that it is preparing for it, and thoroughly. He is an FSB officer, and such figures don't just throw information out for no reason. They often deliberately spread disinformation that is diametrically opposed to the truth. Therefore, the actions of the Baltic states and Scandinavian countries, which are now taking proactive and competent measures, look particularly logical and justified. This alliance includes Iceland, Great Britain, Denmark, the Netherlands, Finland, Sweden, as well as the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, and we should definitely strive to join it. If there is any possibility of joining, we should seriously consider involving Poland. It would be a strategically perfect solution, because we have common goals and objectives with this Scandinavian military group, and it is not by chance that it includes those states that directly border Russia or Belarus, such as the Netherlands and Finland. The Netherlands, Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. These 5 countries are already part of the alliance, and of course Poland, given its border with Belarus and Russia's Kaliningrad exclave, should be there as well. This is the right direction. Military preparations are in full swing, already beyond the planning stage. With strong UK support and backing from several monarchies, the alliance resembles a mini NATO. Joining it would be a smart and promising move. Roman among Putin's statements was the following. Allegedly, Kiev should agree to the conditions set forth in Istanbul. Otherwise, in his words, it will only get worse. In addition, during a meeting with foreign journalists, when he was asked a question directly to his face about the barbaric attack on June 17th on Ukrainian cities, including Kiev, where many civilian casualties occurred, he lied without blinking an eye, saying that only military facilities were hit. We have been saying for 4 years now that you cannot enter into negotiations with terrorists, and the reason is simple. Once a terrorist gets a platform to voice his demands, he will inevitably resort to violence to force them to be met, and now Putin has fully confirmed our words. He got a negotiating platform in Istanbul, where he laid out ultimatums for Ukraine's surrender, and now he is openly declaring, either fulfill the conditions voiced in Istanbul, or I will continue to kill hostages in Kiev. What can be unclear here? Any contacts with Putin must be completely stopped, leaving only one, exclusively fiery. All other forms of interaction should be completely blocked. Prisoner exchanges are an age-old task of intelligence, from battlefield swaps to complex multi-country arrangements. Today, Oman and other Middle Eastern nations are actively helping. These efforts should stay within professional channels, not diplomatic platforms. That's the only effective way. This mechanism still exists, though indirectly, via formats involving third countries. It's fully covered by established international law, Geneva Conventions, their 1977 protocols, and earlier Hague Conventions, so no new legal basis is needed. Roman, the Telegraph reports that the so-called hawks in Putin's inner circle are demanding that he announce a large-scale mobilization and an official declaration of war on Ukraine, because Russia has up to 2 million reservists at its disposal. How realistic is this prospect, and will Putin dare to take such a radical step? These so-called hawks like Naryshkin and Patrushev are really just aging men, more plucked chickens than predators. Putin won't launch another mobilization. Why would he? The 2022 draft already sent 300,000 to their deaths, and soldiers are still slogging through swamps. Who would agree to that again? Forced mobilization now isn't strategy, it's a dead end.
Для того, чтобы поставить в строй кого? Бусифицированных. Они уже объявили в 22 году, кто-то помнит, их отминусовали 300 тысяч. Сейчас вой на болотах стоит до сих пор по этим бикам. Кто будет опять бусифицировать? То есть, что такое принудительная мобилизация?
This is classic bussification. Forced mobilization weakens the army by undermining its professional core. Sending untrained people into combat is like putting a janitor in an operating room. It's a recipe for disaster. It's not strategy, it's self-deception. Putin knows another drawn-out quagmire could destabilize Russia, something he wants to avoid, especially now as the Middle East conflict, sparked by Israel's strike on Iran, has nearly doubled Russia's oil revenues, boosting gas prices too. The Russian economy stands to gain significantly. The war in the Middle East triggered by Israel is complicating matters. Putin is profiting, and Russia's energy infrastructure remains untouched. In this situation, he faces no real pressure and ignores his so-called hawks, who are of no use anyway. Roman Keith Kellogg, the former U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine, says that regarding the possible purchase of the arms package from the United States, whether Trump would agree, he thinks he should agree because, according to Walker, Trump thinks in terms of deals, and where he sees an opportunity to make money, he will certainly do it. Do you think that's really the case, and do you think that perhaps even through European countries, Ukraine will still be able to buy the necessary arms package? At the very least, there is a certain arrangement between Putin and Trump. They have already made a sort of contract, if you will, as Trump himself likes to say. According to this informal deal, Trump does not interfere with or help Ukraine, and Putin, in turn, does not support Iran. All of this is pretty obvious by now. Putin has abandoned the Muslim world and abandoned Iran, just as he once distanced himself from Syria and Assad. Similarly, Trump has turned his back on Ukraine. Direct help from him is sure to be expected. No agreements are possible anymore. Our only hope lies in European mechanisms for buying US arms. These are already delivering results. The M30 and M31 rounds now used effectively with HIMARS in areas like Lvov and Paris come from Germany's program for purchasing American weapons. It's working, and may it keep working. Roman, we did not mention Ukraine's trusted friend Ben Hodges, the former commander of US forces in Europe, who noted that the Ukrainian army has such a deep practical experience of fighting against the occupier that most armies of the North Atlantic Alliance should not teach us, but learn from Ukrainian fighters themselves, adopting their unique combat experience. I disagree with Hodges. Neither most of the NATO armies nor any of them individually are capable of fighting the way the Ukrainian army is doing now. Who among them has had any real experience at all? The French only in Nigeria, Sahel, or Central Africa, and they were simply kicked out of there. Now the French Foreign Legion is mainly based in France and, as they call it, is cleaning feathers. Therefore, in practice, no army of any country in the alliance is ready for full-fledged combat operations at this level. And naturally, our combat experience is extremely important to them, especially the experience of wars of the third millennium, with the active use of aerial components and unmanned systems of various levels. Their priority now is to put troops into real combat, like North Korea is doing. Kim Jong-un sent 10,000 soldiers, plans to send 6,000 more, and likely won't stop there, gradually building a battle-tested force for potential conflict with South Korea or Japan, rather than deploying all 1.5 million at once. He does put in 10 to 15,000 at a time, of which half are usually lost, but the other half come back fired up and able to train the next wave. This approach will give the North Korean army 100,000 experienced fighters in a year, and if this 100,000 hardened army heads for South Korea, the latter will have no choice but to flee to Japan, where they already have tense relations. We will have to swim across the Pacific Ocean to the west coast of the United States if it goes on like this, because the problems of the European armies are obvious, and now the most rational approach for them is to bring their troops to perform combat tasks in rotation. In what format and context, let them decide for themselves. Either temporarily take active soldiers out of service, or involve retired soldiers at first, and then return to the army the soldiers who have been shot as instructors. If these mechanisms aren't activated, Europe will be unprepared to face Russia's 500,000 strong army, just as North Korea's force threatens South Korea. NATO troops lack broad combat experience. Even the US has mostly relied on air operations. A planned strike via Turkey fell through when Erdogan refused consent. Даже те же американцы, они в основном, авиации где-то побили, сейчас вот готовятся там по Ирану нанести какой-то удар. Хотели через Турцию провести наземную операцию, Эрдоган не дал. Iran, in fact, of all NATO countries, has a common border only with Turkey. But Erdogan, of course, will not let anyone through, because his relations with the Americans are extremely strained at the moment. The US military lacks real combat experience, mostly limited to airstrikes, not prolonged campaigns. Compared to how our or Russian aircraft operate with swift, precise strikes, their approach is on a different level. And in such a mode, even the American army is in a certain sense inferior to the Ukrainian army in terms of the level of combat tension. Now we can witness how the first army of the world can disgrace itself, as it happened 3 years ago, with the second army of the world in Ukraine. Now it can happen in Iran, and this will be a clear example. Why? Because there is no combat experience. There are no regular rotations on the line of contact for almost no one. There are basic approaches, of course, as Hodges correctly pointed out, but it is in these details that the key differences I have tried to emphasize lie. Slovak PM Robert Fico hinted at neutrality and a possible NATO exit amid pressure to boost defense spending. His remarks, linked to close ties with Orban, sparked backlash from the opposition and president, though they seem more like political theater aimed at voters than serious intent, as Slovakia is unlikely to leave NATO.
Вже піддався він критиці як і опозиції, так і президента Словаччини. Наскільки такі серйозні заяви, наскільки це можна сприймати взагалі серйозно від Фіцо?
Fico recently called for supporting Ukraine's accession to the European Union, especially after Slovakia received hundreds of millions of euros to rebuild the Ukrainian economy and energy sector. But as soon as the Russians brought their suitcase, he immediately spoke against Ukraine and even against NATO, a typical weathercock who just earns his position. It is not worth spending attention on him, because he no longer represents the future. We should look forward. Both Fico and Orban will simply disappear from the political arena, especially given the growing popularity of the Russian president, who is now the most popular in the world.
Ну, поверьте, сейчас те политические процессы, которые в Венгрии проходят, набирает силы партия ТИСа, которая точно снесет Орбана.
It will blow them away. They are living out their last days, and they themselves are well aware of it. And to make the most of the remaining time, they are just voicing what they are well paid for. That's all. Therefore, Fico should be treated accordingly. He is just a talking head who earns money by what he says, nothing more. Thanks, Roman. Just a reminder, it's Thursday, June 19th. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, link below. Give it a like, share this conversation, and hit the bell to get daily updates from military expert Roman Svitan.